Hi, this is a special video detailing one thing. Given to the latest fairy tale chapters, I am very ashamed that so many people keep on complaining on how much fairy tale is that, fairy tale is that. It does have emotional moments. Therefore, this is an intro list to detailing my 15 most emotional moments of fairy tale, with one bonus and some honorable mentions. Why 15? Well, actually I wanted to take them all, but I feel like these are the moments I feel is most preferably. Yeah, what I mean to say is that, so here is my 15 list. Number 15, Lucy, I have always loved you. Her father dead after she returns home after being sealed for 7 years in Therisweir, shielding from Acnologia's attack. Lucy learns that her father is dead. What makes this scene practically emotional for me is not only when Lucy finally cries, but also before she does that, she visits his grave and she actually begins to talk to Natsun that she didn't get along with her father for a long while. And it wasn't until the naked mummy incident that she began to talk to him again. And she still said after seeing Kana and Gildar's meeting that maybe she should visit him. And when she finally did, he was dead. The most emotional part of this, I feel, is when she gets a present from her father on her birthday, or late birthday, where there is money to pay for her rent and even a letter with him saying, Lucy, I have always loved you. With those words, Lucy cries as she also admits she loved her father. Even though she could never say that to him in person, it's true that despite all the difficulties, she loved her father. And that's why I rank that as a very emotional scene. Number 14, Let's Live On, or more maybe the Meredi forgiving Ultear. As Ultear and Meredi rose away from the Tenro Island, Meredi asks Ultear if she did destroy her town, and she confesses. Having been cleared from her doubts in her mind, Ultear mentions that everything she did she hoped to wash away when she reached the One Magic. And Meredi gets angry, but instead of killing Ultear, Ultear decides to kill herself in order to spare Meredi that sin. But as she falls into the ocean, Meredi saves her and links her with the Meredi's Majesty sense, where she understood every single one of Ultear's emotion. With tears in her eyes, and for the first time the cold and stoic voice breaks to have a very high and very vulnerable child's voice. She begs Ultear to live, and she don't want to be alone, and she forgives her. As they embrace, the tears can just not help by falling from me, for this is the scene of ultimate forgiveness. Number 13, Jellal breaking down and Erza telling him to live. This would normally not considered an emotional moment, but I feel like it is. Up until now, Jellal had been an antagonist, and a pretty ruthless one. But then, suddenly, as Jellal unlocked Nirvana and Erza approach him, he just says the name Erza because that's the only thing he remembers. Yes, Jellal has become amnesic. As Erza approaches him, he of course attacks her. It's then that Erza tells him who she is, that she is Erza, and that he has committed many sins and killed his friend. It's during that moment that the normal, very confident Jellal breaks down, showing that he has indeed lost his memories and that he is nothing, and now he is very afraid of the world, maybe I should say more. This also shows that this was Jellal's first pathway towards redemption, or maybe the right word for that is a way to clear his sins. And what even makes this scene even more heartbreaking, besides Jellal tearing up, is also later on when they are in Nirvana, Erza giving him her hand and saying, "Live and see what happens." What's more, the fact that Erza defends Jellal, saying, "I know there is light within Jellal," which moves him even further, saying, "It's your words that will give me courage. They will become the light to walk the rightful path again." So yeah, I consider that a very emotional one. Number 12. Caith's shelter vanishes. This is a very emotional moment, especially for the poor cute Wendy. She has always been a shy girl, but now she's losing the family she had. But this is also a very heartwarming moment, because as the master Raubo vanishes and he tells them all of his sins and the fact of what he really was, what makes this most emotional is that he took in Wendy after Mr. Gunn escorted Wendy to him, and he could not turn away the honest eyes of Mr. Gunn. And when Wendy woke up and asked if this was a guild, seeing the poor young girl, Rabun, I forgot his name, actually said, "Yes, it is," and created an illusion, all to make Wendy happy. It's very certain that at this farewell, Wendy breaks down as her her marking of the Caith shelter vanishes. But it's also very heartwarming, as Erza is the one who puts her hand on her shoulder and says, "Bury the pain of losing your friends in the arms. No, bury the pain of losing your family in the arms of your friends. Come with us to Fairy Tale." And so the old master vanishes, all in all, with encouraging words and a smile on his face. Number 11. Farewell Fairy Tale Ceremony, or the ceremony where Erza gives the fairy tale ceremony to her Tower of Paradise friends, comrades. What makes this scene very emotional is that early before, her friends from that tower perhaps wanted to join Fairy Tale, but realizing they were so ignorant of the real world, they needed to travel their own path and find their own destiny. Erza, sad but understanding that, still gives them the Fairy Tale's farewell ceremony, which means 3 very important rules. You must never reveal sensitive information about Fairy Tale for others as long as you live. You must never use formal contracts met through your being in the guild for personal gain. But most importantly, 3. Even though their paths have diverged, you must continue to live out your life with all your might. You must never consider your own life to be significant, and you must never forget about your friends for as long as you live. With those words, Erza gets tears in her eyes, as does her friends. And this scene finishes with a very emotional one where Grey, Natsu and Lucy, with their magic, create ceremonial fireworks. Erza says goodbye to her friends, and they too with their tears in eyes, saying, "Even if we followed you, we will only hold you back," meaning sealing their goodbye with a very heartwarming farewell, promising each other to meet again. And Miliana would meet Erza again, but will we ever see Wally and Shu until this manga ends again? Who knows? All we know is that the music that is made in that situation, just like all the other 13, even though I may not have mentioned that, is perfect. Number 10. Allies dies before Ultear rewinds time. Even though many think this is not an emotional one, seeing that Ultear actually managed to save everybody, it's still for me a moment that you should realize this. It may have just been for a moment, but for a moment there, practically everybody gave up. It's more emotional in the anime where more people are seen dying. What I mean is, Grey dies as he gets shot by Dragon Spawn, but Ultear sacrifices her life force to rewind time, but she can only do it 5 minutes. However, those 5 minutes are more than enough to save everybody and giving them everybody a chance. Meaning that I consider that a very emotional one. Because Ultear thought she failed. She didn't, even though no one could have known about that. Another note that is emotional, especially in the anime of that moment, is that when Grey did die in the other, before Ultear rewound that time, Juvia, Meridi and Leon were crying their eyes out. And Juvia practically, she had completely stopped functioning. You could all but feel the pain in that one. And many others had also died during that moment. Therefore I consider that a very emotional one. Not to mention the song in the background and the situation. It just works. Number 9, Let's Join Hands, as the beautiful fairy tale theme in the slow version is played in the background. This scene becomes even more emotional in the anime. After Acnologia have attacked Tenro Island and the fairy tale tries to fight them off, they realize that Acnologia is too powerful, so instead Acnologia decides to annihilate all of Sirius Island or Tenro Island with one might of its powerful dragon breath. Refusing to give up, although not knowing if they can survive, Fairytale grabs each other's hands. And what makes this even more emotional in the anime, we see a complete panel on who is holding who. I know we do that also in the end too. What I mean is, it goes in a circle on who Wendy is holding hands with Gajeel and Charle, and Natsu is holding hands with Lucy. Makarov is holding hands with Laxus, and even Elfman holding hands with not only one of his sisters but even Evergreen. Yes, I consider that a very emotional one, particularly in the end where they, with all their might, tries to stop the attack. Even though Fairy Swear does that, they swear we will all return home, back to Fairytale. And as I said in the beginning of this, the music, it just sells the scene. Number 8, Father and Son and Juvias' Guilt. This is also a moment I consider very emotional. Not only because there is a very beautiful tone as usual in this scoring, but also because you can practically feel the pain in the characters as they do this. Silver, originally telling to be Deliora, is revealed to really be Grey's father, although a corpse that had been doing many deeds all for revenge. Having seen his son being alive, he wanted to die by with his son's hands, and to try to get him to overcome his darkness once again. But Grey cannot just finish his father, even if it is for Fairytale, but he can cry. As the normal stoic Grey cries, Silver says that's fine too, you are human after all, and he hugs his son. And then we are switched to the scene that Silver took Grey to the grave he was standing at the beginning of the Tartarus arc. And that stands Mika and Grey crossed out. That's the grave that Silver was praying to. The grave of his wife and what he thought was his son. But that scene, but those emotional moments doesn't stop. Silver begs Juvia, a girl that has Grey close to her heart, to finish Caith. At the beginning she is reluctant, mostly because she doesn't know if that's really what Grey wants. But as she gets captured by Caith, she is forced to do that. And what makes that really emotional, as she kills Caith, she shed enormous amount of tears, desperately apologizing to Grey for having committed that. But Silver, contacting her telepathically one last time, reassures her this was the right thing. And he tells her to take care of Grey. Seeing Juvia cry like that much, especially the performance in their voice actors like Juvia and Grey, it just sells the scene. You cannot help but cry. And say it like this, even though the Deliora moment was still a troll, there's no doubt that was an emotional moment that the anime perfectly nailed. Number 7, Kana's Reflection. As Kana is breaking down at Mavis's grave, thinking she should have become an S-class magician in order to meet that person. We finally see through flashback who that person is. Well, none other than Gildarts, who is revealed to be Kana's father. But that is unknown to Gildarts himself. What makes this practically emotional most is actually the anime scene even more, where a very young Kana, Kana was actually very young and cute before she became very sexy and foul-mouthed. She heard from a will from her mother that her father was alive, and she came to Fairytale in order to find him. But she couldn't approach Gildarts, nor telling Gildarts that she was his biological daughter. What makes this practically most emotional is those enemy flashbacks, or even in the manga, where we see her past, and the more and more she tried to tell him, the more and more an anxiety in her heart built up until she just couldn't bear to tell him. But that emotion doesn't stop just there. When a flashback ends, she looks at Lucy's help card, which makes a cute but also emotional "help, help" sound. Kana cries at realizing what she has done. She has betrayed her friends, and that's not something she wants. So she decides to give up the need of becoming an S-class magician. All she needs is the power to protect her friends, because after all, Kana loves this guild. So she approaches Mavis's grave, tries to touch it again, and says those words. What makes that most emotional is when she's saying, as I said before, I don't care if I become an S-class magician, I don't even care if I can't tell my father how I feel. I just need the power to protect my friends. I love this guild, which Mavis approves of, giving her fairy glitter. That is what makes that scene a very emotional one. A child who wanted to approach her father but just couldn't. There are like many of those who have a parent that they are afraid of approaching for rejection, or maybe even because they cannot live up to those standards. For Kana, she feared she would never become as admirable and strong as Gildarts. With the music playing, that makes that even more emotional, and the Kana child one, I consider that a very emotional scene. Number 6, the Golden Plains. Future Lucy meets her friends again. As the future is of doom is repelled, the dead body of Lucy is teleported back to her time, and she is sent to the true heaven, a beautiful place of golden plains. But that's not the most beautiful part. The beautiful part that the anime definitely makes is creating a soul piano 2014 version of the Fairytale theme, as Natsu approaches Lucy again, saying, "Let's go on adventure," and Happy approaches too. As Lucy sees her friends again, she can only cry. The music, the moment, and especially those beautiful golden plains that we can classify as heaven, that just sells the scene, knowing that the future Lucy has been through torment, but she is finally, at long last, at peace. Number 5, Laxus excommunicated and sent off. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. What makes this scene very emotional is before Laxus has proven almost to be an arrogant and a rageful jerk, but it turns out that he carries very inner turmoil of never being the person his grandfather is, and afraid of being always compared to his grandfather, almost like a teenage throwing a temper tantrum. So after the battle of Fairytales ended and he's finally defeated by Natsu, the Laxus humbles a little, and Makarov says that he needs to enjoy life a little bit more, and relaxes. With that moment, he is though forced to excommunicate Laxus, seeing that he must find himself, which Laxus surprisingly agrees, showing the long road to a character development that will turn this badass into an even better badass. And what practically sells this scene even more emotional is not only at the first time the very beautiful fairy parade music, but also as Laxus is preparing to leave Fiora Kingdom, not Fiora Kingdom, Magnolia, or whatever they were. He sees his grandfather doing the fairytale sign and everybody else doing that. as he also remembers he did the same as a child in order to tell his grandfather, I am right here, I may not see you, but I am still watching over you. Laxus can only cry as he realizes once again how much of a fool he was. But he is not alone. He does have friends and family, and that family is Fairy Tail. Number 4, Father and Daughter at Last, or the scene where Kana tells Gildarts who she really is. At the beginning, that scene begins comical, as Gildarts just continues to try to remember every single woman he slept with. Yeah, the all-powerful badass Gildarts is a womanizer. But later on, that funny scene changes as he finally remembers, and not remembers, but realizes that Kana is Cornelia's child, the one woman he loved. He embraces Kana and wonders why she was so quiet about all this, but Kana couldn't tell him. What makes this scene even more emotional is that although Kana says that we should just do as we always do, she still says the word, I was happy to meet you, father. And Gildarts can only remember every single time he saw Kana, how she grew up. He realizes how blind he was. He embraces her even more with love than before, and has tears in his eyes, saying, I will never let you have those lonely emotions again. And the beautiful music and the beautiful scene in that anime just definitely make you cry, because in that moment, father and daughter had at last found each other, and that is why I consider that a very emotional moment. Number 3, Rob and Simon's sacrifices. This is definitely one of the most emotional moments in Fairy Tail ever, because it happens in different, I want to say times, because the first is Rob's sacrifice, an old elderly man that has been like a grandfather or uncle to the young and helpless children of the Tower of Paradise slaves, shields Erza from a blow of a magician and uses the last magician to try to fight them off before dying. But before he dies, he gives her a smile and thanks Erza for having shown her beautiful child face to him. That, and the scene where Erza wonders if she can ride a broom and take Rob with her on that ride, just sells that scene, and the music is definitely helping. Not to mention that many years later, a similar situation would happen, only this time it would be Simon who would shield Erza and Natsu from Jellal's attack. And that scene is practically more emotional than Rob's death, because as Simon dies, the anime makes that scene even more emotional with their beautiful sad magic, and as Simon remembers Erza as a child and also remembers her very beautiful smile. But the child Erza says Simon's name, and then the grown-up Erza screams Simon's name, which he barely can hear. And the practically most sad part is, besides his death of course, is that he cannot muster the strength to say the final words, I love you. That is why that is one of the most gut-wrenching scenes ever. Number 2, Ur's ice shell and the truth about Ultear. Many moments into one, but they are more connected than you think. Where do I even start? Well, for the first of all, Ur's sacrifice in sealing Deliora in ice to save her 2 disciples, Grey and Leon. Although Grey is the one who is conscious and emotionally and cryingly watches as his mentor, the one he was very rude to and not showing respect to, sacrifices her life force to be turned into ice. The music, the moment, and the pain in the child Grey is so perfect that as he cries and screams out her name, you too wanna cry and scream out the name. And what most sells the scene is not only Ur's final smile, but also the words, I will seal your darkness. This makes it even more emotional that when the ice shell is melted and the Ur's ice turns into the water that falls into the ocean, Deliora cracks and dies. And Grey once again remembers that Ur did indeed seal away his darkness by draining its life force. And that is more connected than you think, because in Ultear's case, at the beginning Ultear had just been a very manipulative woman, but later it turned out that even she harbored some emotion. The emotion of abandonment, thinking that her mother abandoned her when she got sick. Only it turned out that it wasn't that case. How did she find that out? Well, when she fell into the ocean, she could hear Ur's voice and her memories, because she was practically inside of her mother. And that anime moment is definitely very emotional, as beautiful music is played, and Ur's painful face in pain, wonders why has her daughter died. She is tricked into dying, and when she falls on her knees and screams for them to take back her daughter, that just works. And as a bonus and finale, the most emotional end to that scene is when Ultear falls back into the ocean after having been defeated by Grey's attack. She mentions she just wanted to get to the one magic world, to get to a place before she hated her mother, thinking that she abandoned him and raised new children. And it's the final words that Ur says: "That girl was the proof of my existence, the proof of my tears. Ultear." That moment and that emotion in the anime particularly is beyond beautiful. This one is a bonus scene. I know that may sound like cheating, but there's a reason for that. Because this is a filler scene. It's neither in the manga nor in the anime. And even though I mentioned the anime more, this is still a very emotional one, because the music and the moment up to it, you cannot help but cry for it. And how does it do? Well, it's called Imitala's or Michelle's true form. Imitala, the one who was created by Brain 2 in order to get close to Lucy. Turns out that she was not a human, but everything she said, that she was like a cousin or a little sister to Lucy, because she herself even called Lucy Nessan, turned out to be true. Because when she tries to free Lucy from a prison, when she realizes her mistake, Brain 2 turns her back into her true form. The true form, which is a very beautiful and smiling little doll that sheds one tear, saying, "Nessan, I'm sorry, I love you." And Lucy herself can only cry, because now she realized that everything Michelle or Imitala said was true. Because she really did have a younger sister. She was the doll that her parents gave to her when she was a child, and she called that doll her little sister. And that is so surprising, that a filler scene can be so emotional. Nowadays dolls scare you, but seeing a smiling doll crying like that is emotional indeed. And now for the honorable mention and the true, I think, real emotional one. Number 1, The Dragon's Farewell. This can be argued to not being the most emotional scene, and many people may actually criticize me. Wait, wasn't Ignil's death emotional? Yes, Ignil's death was emotional, even though he was already dead. But the thing is, the anime didn't really play that out right, I feel, and I don't know why. I don't know if it was because I was distracted by the filler anime scenes, or that the music in that moment wasn't right. But then, The Dragon's Farewell, that definitely worked. The music in that moment was right, and what made it even more emotional, that the Dragon Slayers have always wondered what happened to their parents. Rouge and Sting thought they killed their parents, but in the end, they still have to go. The dragons still have to leave, because they were already dead. Seeing Wendy's crying face again, as Grandine tells her she loves her, And Metallicana, only taunting Gagiel, is still a way to tell him that I too care for you. And even the normal stoic Gagiel has a tear in his eyes. The one who's most breaked by all of this is Natsu, that even though people argue that Igneel was already dead, even when he was hit by Acnologia's attack, Natsu didn't know that he was already dead. And even if he did know he was already dead, I mean Igneel was already dead, he would still have broken down and crying, telling Igneel that he had so many things he wanted to share with him. Igneel's spirit, before departing to the heaven, encourages the son to live on and find new things. With a solemn vow, scream into the sky and the very deep tears, Natsu swear to avenge his death and destroy Acnologia. And Igneel, although we cannot see his smile, has words of enormous heartwarming, telling him that's the right way. That is why I ranked that as a very emotional one, because this was also a turnaround in the series. This had been the goal all along, but in the end that was lost. It is also very emotional because this is a moment considered very equal on the Rave series. Rave, where he was also the main character, Haru was also looking for his father, and in the end his father sacrificed himself to save Haru. So yeah, that's why I considered that the number one emotional moment. Maybe it's not, who knows. If anybody have watched this long video, feel free to tell me if you have any emotional fairytale moments, if anything at all. And sorry for the long one, but it turned out to be that way. Give me your thoughts if you have any.